Most heartfelt greetings and salutations, theydies and gentlethems. I eagerly welcome you to Sturgeon's most premier station, Dusklight Radio, hosted by yours truly, the incorporeal, iridescent, infinitesimal Everett J. Blackwell. Perhaps you know of us Blackwells. We were the campaign managers for Sturgeon's first elected nightmare politician, the Bendy Man. Now that name didn't go down so well. It connoted unpleasant memories of his past role within our community, back when Sturgeon was just a loose collective of villages and the Bendy Man demanded tribute so as not to recruit more of our young to his brood. So, in a modern day, we gave him a modern title, Mr. Benz. His policy was that of unity between the two sides of Sturgeon, namely the normal, blighted humans on one side and the nightmare folklore district on the other that are traditionally kept separate in most instances for everyone's protection, though the blighted members of Sturgeon can cross over and usually inhabit job roles look after everyone now. For example, following Mr. Benz's election, Sturgeon started to expand its infrastructure. Now we have a bar called The Spaces in Between that caters to all in exchange for stories rather than payment. Then we've got the Hotel Inertia, a place of innumerable floors housing unique desires and locales on each one. A mortuary clinic called Death May Die that specifically looks after folklore creatures and gives them proper burial rites. We even have the Lockwood and McGraw Nightmare Detective Agency to investigate any crimes committed by or against nightmares and folklores. All things that were made possible by Mr. Benz. His slogan was great. Together, we are strong. Apart, we are little more than mewling whelps in the blackness, defenseless, and waiting to be taken by the things that move unseen. We do not want to attract their attention, so please, citizens, huddle under my guiding light. He got elected 6 times. Total landslide. If you're just joining us, first of all, welcome and do not skip. I promise each of these are unique in their own way. We don't form pacts with barons of hell that involve us sacrificing creepy Catholics in exchange for funny anecdotes for nothing, you know? Anyway, I'm Dusklight's main and most fabulous half-dead host. My job at this fine radio station is to bring you some of the most twisted, interesting, and downright bizarre tales that I and my wonderful many-legged runners collect from the far corners of Sturgeon and beyond. Some of them will make you laugh, some will make you cry, and some will force you to uproot your entire life. You decided to do this long ago. The songs on the radio constantly talking about how they hated their hometown and that it was so washed up emboldened you, but you never took it to heart. That is, until you saw them. They didn't see you. Not at first, anyway. But as time went on, they caught sight of you and they never stopped seeing you. You were attracted to something within them. Not just on the surface, but something special about them. You could never put your finger on it, but it was inescapable to you. When they got on that boat, you eagerly followed, hiding yourself in the cargo and listening out for their footsteps. You were always good at knowing whose footsteps were whose. Theirs was soft, delicate, and well-intentioned. When you saw light again, it was underneath a black sun that bathed the surrounding buildings in twilight. A mixture of lavender and crimson stained the skyline, and everyone on the docks was grabbing at their heads with orgasmic smiles. Except them. They were staring right at you with their jaw slack. You shouldn't be here, they breathed. They were right. You shouldn't. But the story led you here, and as you gazed at what moved behind the black sun, you realized that it was here you would stay. It's time to introduce our story for this evening. The story, titled I Was Just Told the 3 Words You Never Want to Hear, comes to us from... Really? It comes to us from head custodian, apparently he got a promotion, TJ Lee, who will also be pulling double duty as our narrator. TJ has attached a note to the transcript informing everyone that this is another story from Sturgeon, and as we delve further into the world, he has transcribed for us the playlists will be made longer. But for those who are unfamiliar, they can dive in at the reading guide linked below. TJ's actually still wiping Max's blood off the window and bouncing on his toes and licking some of the blood off the window. I don't think it empowers him, but I'm not entirely sure what does, since TJ never leaves the station. If you like TJ's work here or elsewhere, be sure to show him some love over on Twitter at TJ Lee, his subreddit r/TJ Lee, his podcast, The Writer's Mythos, where he looks into the untold tales of the world's most famous horror writers, and, if you somehow have time, consider pre-ordering his first novella in the Chronicles of Sturgeon, The Last Sin Eater, as adapted by the amazing Romnex on YouTube, releasing May 7th in Kindle and paperback, all linked below. Special thanks must be given first to Mandy Mo for rendering yours truly in the beauteous image you see when you look at our page. Next, Dusklight Bowser, the Ultra Trevor Henderson, the man behind Siren Head, for allowing Dusklight to use some of the images he's captured of various abominations. And, of course, lest we forget, some of the music you hear is provided by the Dark Somnium, with gracious thanks. With that, the sun has set and dusk has crawled into the studio once more. Whether you're working, prepping to sleep, or evading the formless void that will one day consume us all, Blackwell is here to soothe your ears and captivate your soul. Now, close your eyes and take a deep breath. The scene has been set and the light is on. It's time to walk towards it.
You ever hear about Delta P?
I bristle from behind my magazine at the voice cutting the silence in the waiting room. I turned to see a middle-aged man who had taken a seat on the other side of the wall. A little too far down to make out features, but his suit was hard to ignore. Pinstriped grey, oversized and with big frayed holes all across it, like he'd been in some kind of accident. Some was shoddily patched up with mismatched material, giving him a bit of a vagrant look. I double-took and thought he'd been seriously injured, but when my eyes adjusted, I couldn't see any at this distance. His leg bounced in place as he leaned his head over, draping it on his shoulder and staring at me. Hands clasped together, and asked it again in the exact same intonation when I didn't respond quick enough.
You ever hear about Delta P?
I feel the distinct sensation of being eyed up, but I play along. No? What is it? He drapes his arms over his knees and casts his head up, looking up at the clock in the waiting room as he speaks again.
It's a pressure shift in a pipe when liquid is passing through. You can't tell it's there until something happens, usually catastrophic damage to anything passing by. You ever see that video of a crab walking along a pipe just before it vanishes?
The side of his lips curl into a grin when I realize I had. It was fascinating, but gruesome.
Well, it's that. Plenty of men and women have been caught against Delta P. Their bodies ripped to shreds. A small mass the size of that clock face destroys their organs and expels them out to sea. Makes you think, don't it?
I stare for a moment before replying, unsure of how social etiquette came into play when dealing with someone weird. But where I come from, manners are important, so I humor him, electing to focus on my magazine while I reply, as meeting his gaze just hurt my eyes under the fluorescent lights. Think about what, exactly? His chair creaks as he replies, a confidence now oozing through his words.
How similar our situation is to theirs. Awaiting a scan amid fears of something small, maybe no bigger than a watch face, tearing our insides to shreds and infecting our organs. All things have a purpose, I suppose.
I admit the conversation was taking my mind off my own anxieties, so I decided to press a little. You're talking about the butterfly effect, right? The idea that a butterfly's wings flap in one tail and cause a hurricane in another. He laughed, a horrid, choking sound that seemed to lodge in his throat and never escape past his lips, something trapped there that he fed on.
It's never quite that pronounced, kid. More so that every decision you make is already leading you to where you'll ultimately end up. Just depends on what state you end up there in. But you're the sort that makes careful decisions. I can tell.
I look up from my magazine and he's moved a few seats down, some 10 feet away now. His features are coming into place a little bit more. Slicked back grey hair with a patch missing where his skull was dented in. Old stitches littering the fragile skin like staples on paper. His eyes, there's something wrong with them. But the moment my brain tries to process what it is, it simply diverts to something else, as if there's an instinctive trigger in me to avoid it. "What are you in for?" I ask, trying to keep my nerve. Not exactly scared, but definitely feeling uneasy. A mounting sensation of concern that hadn't hit critical mass. He held up a hand and lightly slapped his opened jaw, creating a popping sound over and over, each intonation getting lower in pitch. What the fuck was wrong with this guy? He stopped, shook his head, and pointed a long index finger at his patchwork suit affirmatively.
I'm the mayor. They got me in for a routine check. Nothing quite like you, I'm afraid, son.
The realization of this man not being all there and the two of us on our own in this waiting room was beginning to sink in. But I found myself unable to stop talking with him. The mayor of where? What do you mean, not like me? I'm also in for a routine check. He shook his head and tutted. Again, he did this incessantly, each tut growing lower and slower as his good eye fixed on me. I swear that if I looked long enough, the pupil was growing larger, more dilated.
You know of the trolley problem, Stanley?
He asked, ignoring my questions entirely and immediately setting me on edge. My jaw fell slack at the mention of my name and he smiled wide.
So you have heard of it?
I swallow, the lights now burning my eyes and giving that strange sensation they're dimming. Was I even blinking now? I couldn't be sure. It's the idea of putting your shopping trolley away, doing a selfless act for no expectation of gratitude, praise, or good deeds. It's a test of someone's character. His smile doesn't meet his eyes. He takes another seat down, and now he's almost directly opposite me.
Ah, you're talking about the shopping cart. I was referring to the trolley problem. A situation wherein you can call a lot of people or just on one. Do you take everyone else with you or just a single soul? Really tells you about a man based on what he does with that given information. He clicks his tongue and looks me up and down. Right age, right life. You could have done so much if you'd just taken a few steps to your left instead of your right. Well, maybe something will change your mind. I make a move to stand up, now feeling very much unsafe. Before I can even say, "Excuse me," and will my legs into lifting my body, he puts a hand on my knee. Absolutely no force or tension, but his sheer touch overpowers me. Now, you don't treat a new friend that coldly, let alone a mayor. We're not done yet, so hold your nerve for me. All I'm doing is asking you some questions, friend. His voice drops, and the pleasantries fade away for just a moment. So do me a kindness and answer them properly. As he gripped me, I could feel the malice running through his veins, and I made the mistake my instincts had been screaming not to. I focused on his eyes. It was impossible not to see the hazel eye's pupil growing wider and wider, slowly encompassing the entirety of his eyeball, the milky eye simply swiveling lazily. In that moment of absolute fear, I knew exactly what it reminded me of. A predator getting ready to pounce. Where
Where did you say you were the mayor of? I choked, trying to get my composure under control, hoping if I could keep him calm, he wouldn't hurt me. He was so close that even if I yelled out, nobody would get to me before he did damage. We've all seen what nutjobs can do, given the opportunity. He cocked his head to the side, grinning. Were his teeth always that far apart? Small gaps dotted between each incisor, and black gums festered underneath.
I didn't. It's a wonderful place that'd change you for the better, though. Oh, we have all sorts of facilities designed to test our citizens' limits and make them into better people. We take them from the brink of death and give them new life. Hotels, bars, think tanks, circuses, you name it. You see, everyone in my town, whether they know it or not, are the sorts of people who deviated from their path, took a few steps left instead of right, said no to some arrangements and yes to others. Eventually, broken and destitute, they all wind up in my homestead with something they need. The air felt hot around us, and the surrounding scenery danced in that heatwave manner you see on the sidewalk outside. You will too, you know, as will your family.
My headache grew in intensity, the words seeping into my skull and adding to a swirling rush of blood, threatening to make me puke from the intense, crushing feeling. I put up a hand to clutch my head, but again he grabbed me.
Shh. Not yet, Stanley. I'm almost done. You asked me where I was mayor, and old Samson Carstairs isn't the type to refuse a request of information from a potential citizen. You passed all my tests with flying colors, and when you step into that office, your true journey will begin. I hope you'll join us when the time is right. A town like Sturgeon really could use a person of your skills. I hear you're most gifted at finding people who don't want to be found. I wish you luck, son.
Sturgeon? Where had I heard?
But I want you to listen closely to these words, boy. When you know what they mean, you'll know where to go.
He let go and leaned in, a fervent whisper in his voice as he uttered just 3 last words. For as long as I live, I will never forget that expression. His teeth pushed further apart, the black mass on his gums bubbled, and I swear to God, I saw something in the back of his throat. Just for a moment.
Not 1, 2.
Stop it! I finally bellowed, standing up in a fury with a burst of energy. The heat around me dissipated, and I was breathing heavily. Mr. Mikulski? The nurse looked over, concern riddled across his face as I did a double take. There was nobody sitting in the room with me. After the scan was complete, I was asked to wait in the doctor's office. Some 15 minutes went by before he and the consultant sat down, grim-faced.
It's a benign tumor, Mr. Mikulski. It'd explain your headaches, blackouts, and any,
He pauses, shifting uncomfortably as he looks at the notes, obviously trying to be delicate.
Incidents of hallucinations one would understandably experience. We could schedule in surgery if all goes well. It should fix the problem in due course. You're just lucky that you didn't take any longer. It could have been an even bigger problem. Guess it's a right place, right time kind of situation, huh?
The consultant ran me through the procedure, the percentage rate of outside issues and so forth, but I remained in a fugue state for so much of it. I was healthy, I didn't smoke, drink, hurt anyone else, or do anything to damage my body, but I was still stricken with this thing in my head. Even more so, it made the old guy's questions all the more bizarre, like he knew something I didn't. And it was on reflection of this a couple nights ago that a black envelope was placed under my door. My wife handed it to me with a look of bemusement on her face.
Maybe it's from your cousin?
She said, kissing me on the cheek before making us some dinner. Who, Eleanor? No, she's not the familial type. I smiled wistfully. We had a lot of fond memories growing up before she was taken in by her grandparents. As I opened it, my eyes widened and a myriad of concerns ran through my brain. Chief of all that was the mayor's grin. "Honey, where did Nell move to a while back?" I asked, my hands shaking and the feeling of sickness rushing through my stomach.
I think it was some town called Sturgeon. Why?
The flashes of the old man ran through my head, and the way he described the town as a place where people deviated from their path to get something they needed. A fresh wave of sickness and fear enveloped me as I cast my eyes down at the open contents of the envelope. It was an application form for citizenship to Sturgeon, pre-approved. Beneath was a copy of my scan and a post-it note attached and signed by the mayor, confirming my worst fears as I saw the white masses in my skull, one that the doctors had obviously missed, one that looked large and imposing in comparison. My head swelled, and amid the questions of hallucinations and borderline madness, all I could think of was those prophetic words the old man had whispered with a smile before I went in for my scan.
Not 1, 2.
Who'd have thought that we'd have a tale about not only our wonderful eternal Mayor Carstairs, but some new information about one of Sturgeon's greatest warriors in Madam Nell Lockwood. If you don't know who she is yet, don't worry, you will soon. I don't know about y'all, but the 3 words I wouldn't want to hear are "you're not undead." Can you imagine how much boring living activities I'd have to take up again? Like exercise, sneezing, haircuts. Oh, that's the one perk of being half dead. Not decaying to a point of absolute grossness, still hot enough to pass for alive, and a low maintenance look to boot. It ain't all that bad. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some of our other transmissions. We're adding them regularly, and we'd love to have you as part of the Dusklight family by subscribing, hitting the bell of suffering, it's just a normal bell, but adding stuff like that is nice, and leave a comment with stories you'd love for my many-legged runners to find. We love fan art at Dusklight, and it warms my black heart to see it. We also love dedication, and dedication needs to be rewarded. And we want to thank more of our loyal listeners for joining these premieres each and every time. This time we give thanks to Lady Nevermore, Changeling, Tragic Slayer, and Stephen Stevens, all hail the Ferret Queen indeed, for giving us their valuable time. I hope we can continue this forward growth and spread our spores to the far corners of YouTube, infecting the airways with our intoxicating presence. When we hit 500 subs, we've got something wonderful planned. And one last time, listeners, close your eyes and breathe with me. Remember, no matter how bad things are, how cruel people can be, and how heavy your shoulders may feel with the weight of the world bearing down on them, Dusklight will always be here to lift the load and provide you with some respite. Drink some water, watch a nature documentary, eat some takeout, and sleep on the cool side of the pillow. You matter. You are loved. Every day is another chance. I'll see you again when the sun sets and dusk enters the station.